Does critical race theory conflict with the gospel? If so, how does it?
Yeah, I believe it does. And that's due to one particular concept that critical race theory introduced, and that's the concept of intersectionality.
So we talked about social justice. Isn't that a biblical concept, though? The idea of having justice in our society? Don't we want to help the poor? Isn't that part of our job, is to reach out to those who are in need and have speak up for those who don't have a voice?
Absolutely, yeah. Throughout Scripture, we see that the Lord's heart for the oppressed, for those, the poor, the widows, the orphans, and we're commanded to do our part, to love those in those situations and to use our power on behalf of the less fortunate. The problem with critical theory is in how it understands injustice and how it understands oppression.
Okay, talk about those things. How does critical race theory understand injustice?
So critical theory's understanding of oppression is that the ideas, the norms, the values that a society has are oppression. So we're not talking about, the biblical understanding of oppression would be using your power in a cruel or unjust manner. So right. You think of American slavery, Egyptian slavery.
Right, pharaohs enslaving the Jews and, right.
Exactly, so that's what most Christians would think of when we're talking about injustice or oppression. And so when critical theory or critical race theory talks about ending oppression, it sounds really good to Christian ears.
It does. We should end oppression.
Exactly. But we need to understand what they're actually talking about. So in the summer of 2020, after the death of George Floyd, the Smithsonian Institute published a website to help Americans talk about race, since we were having this national conversation about racism and racial injustice. And they published as part of that, an infographic called I think it was the aspects and something of whiteness. And it's explaining this whole concept of whiteness and what whiteness is, this oppressive force that white culture has imposed upon and was keeping people of color oppressed. And in that, they listed out several things that made up whiteness. Among that, it was things like the Protestant work ethic, or delayed gratification, politeness, punctuality, being places on time, even the idea that Christianity was the norm, or monotheism. Like monotheism, they identified as an aspect of whiteness and white culture, which I'm sure the ancient Israelites would like a word about that. But so you have to understand that as we hear the critical race theory call to be about fighting oppression and tearing down systemic injustice, we have to ask really good questions about what is it you mean by that? Because anything on that Smithsonian list is, you find that in Scripture is praised as a good thing, and so critical theory would see things that the Bible admonishes us to do, such as discipline and responsibility, as tools of oppression.
We also hear the words lived experience and empathy being the most important things that we can feel today in regard to these issues. But you say that those emotions of empathy, compassion, understanding are being weaponized and used by critical theory to destroy our culture. What do you mean by that? So
lived experience is the idea that an oppressed person has because of their social location as an oppressed person, they have unquestionable access to knowledge, understanding of oppression. So they have a moral authority that their oppression confers to them. And so this is like I think the primary Trojan horse that brings these ideas into the church is when these topics come up, you and I would be having this conversation and people would say, well, you guys are two white guys. You really can't be talking about this. You don't have any insight into this.
Yeah, you've never walked a mile in someone else's
Right.
shoes.
Right. And so as Christians, we know that we're supposed to listen to others. We're to learn from others. We're to hear other perspectives. But critical theory takes that a step further and says that it is an unquestionable source of truth, that the truth is located in the lived experience of the oppressed. And so it's and beyond that, it's not just that you have to accept their understanding of the truth, you have to accept the conclusions drawn from their understanding.
That's interesting. It feels to be like you've got two different teams playing a game of basketball, but really only one of them gets to actually go out on the field and play, and they control the referees as well. So it seems like some parts of society don't get to be part of the conversation. Does critical race theory conflict with the gospel? If so, how does it?
Yeah, I believe it does. And that's due to one particular concept that critical race theory introduced, and that's the concept of intersectionality. So intersectionality would say that your level of oppression is based on how many different oppressed groups you can identify with. So a black man would be less oppressed than a black woman, because the black man is only oppressed on the one category of being black. But a black woman would be oppressed because she's black and a woman. And so they believe that there's these interlocking systems of oppression that need to be examined. And that includes sexuality. And so to fully embrace critical race theory, you have to start chipping away at your biblical sexual ethic. And so it immediately gets you into some dicey territory where you have to start tossing out parts of the Bible that don't align with critical theory.
That's fascinating. And so you're suggesting that critical race theory is actually teeing up something else, which is gender theory, and that the two actually are two sides of the same coin. Why? How is that? How does critical race theory pave the way for gender theory?
Sure. So when someone embraces these ideas from critical race theory through intersectionality and seeing how all the different oppressed groups are oppressed differently, you have to begin asking questions of like, okay, if I can't speak into this, if I can't talk about these issues as a white man, because I don't understand the social location of the oppressed, the lived experience of the
who are oppressed.
Right. As a Christian, that sounds good when we're talking about race. But then once we bring up the subject of sexuality, well, if I'm going to be consistent, I can't speak into the life of, a gay friend because I don't know his experience. I can't deliver biblical truth in those relationships because my perspective is that of a straight man. And I don't know, so I just need to listen and learn, and I probably need to interact with some liberal theologians that have a different affirming view of homosexuality. And so this is how it begins to erode your faith, because we're bringing in this paradigm that just shifts the way we interact with the truth.
And the theory of critical theory is that somehow all of this turmoil and this separating into groups and the fighting is somehow going to produce a utopia in society?
That's the plan. I think sometimes I think that the whole goal is perpetual revolution, because angry, divided populace is very easy to exploit.
Wow, crazy things. Upending the family, looking to divide people and get people to fight, and out of that comes a utopia. Crazy ideas. Hi, I'm Kirk Cameron, and thanks for watching the Kirk Cameron on TBN YouTube channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. A couple of things. Please make sure that you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so that you're notified every time a new video is posted. And be sure to share your takeaway in the comments and invite a friend to join the conversation.